I guess within the constraints of the time, we had touched on that. We cannot spend all the time defining on definitions. The Attorney General, as enshrined in the Constitution, is the chief law officer of the state. He's the most senior lawyer in Nigeria. That's why at any judicial function, he sits, he's the number one there. And so, by the constitutional definitions, he is the one who is the custodian of our law. He is the one who is saddled with the responsibility of championing interpretation of the Constitution. When there is any legal breach, the Attorney General is supposed to be ahead of everybody else to say, okay, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. The issue at hand, I believe what the President has written by way of a memo to the National Assembly was the handiwork of the Attorney General. He is the one who has looked through the amendments and he has come up with his own opinion that, Mr. President, what they are trying to do is an affliction of your responsibility as the head of the executive. That is his role. Now, talking about the Minister of Justice, and that's why it is incumbent at this point, like Mr. Shitu said, timing. You see, Nigerian democracy is maturing, and we cannot continue to, further democratic tenets by relying on obsolete law, particularly the gun law. Now, the office of the minister, because of the way, for instance, other ministers, the members of the cabinet, you know what they do. They are like heads of department. They are supposed to, assist Mr. President in discharging some of his functions. Very specialized areas of administration, medical, that's Minister of Health and all that. So when you are a minister, it's like you head a department under the executive. Mm-hmm. Now, when you now fuse the two, you have Attorney General and Minister for Justice. He is the chief law officer. He is not supposed to be chief law officer of government per se. He is supposed to be chief law officer of Nigeria, of everybody, of you and I, of internally displaced persons, of everybody. Mm-hmm. But when you now say he's the head of department of law in Nigeria, I'm trying to break it down so that people can understand. He's the head of department of a unit under the presidency or under the executive. Mm-hmm. It raises issues of reality.
Yes. Let's say in a situation where you have issues that have to do with, for instance, abuse of human rights. Yes. The Attorney General who comes and says, Mr. President, this is what the law has to say about this.
Yes, like for instance, what the police has done in this particular instance is wrong. What the army has done, they shouldn't do it. There
might be a back and forth.
There may be an executive reason that is over and above that which is legal.
Which is what the Minister of Justice will be pursuing.
Now, he has to pursue that on behalf of the executive. But if the Attorney General, for instance, in those, may God rest the soul of Chief Ganifaweni, he had to apply for the issuance of writ of mandamus on several occasions to compel the Attorney General, Minister for Justice, to take up certain matters. Maybe mass killing by the police, accidental discharge, that the Attorney General should be compelled to do it. And more often than not, he will fight tooth and nail, and the results never came. That was why, at that point in time, it was being speculated that someone like Chief Ganifaweni can be the independent prosecutor. It could be an Attorney General while they have their minister functioning under the executive. But the Attorney General cannot, oil spillage, for instance, in the Niger Delta. You have a situation where Nigerians have to go to the US, go to Switzerland to file actions against the Nigerian government. Why? Because the Attorney General will not do it. But when these same Nigerians go to UK, they get a lawyer and they under the laws there that, okay, because this company is from here, the conflict of laws now. This company is from here. What they have done to me in my country, under your law, must be punished or must be sanctioned. Then they have to go out. Those are the kind of functions that the Attorney General should discharge. He should not have to go to foreign jurisdictions to do that. You have a situation here where you are talking of corruption. Before we came in, Mr. Shidru and so we're talking about corruption, for instance, and we said, look, this corruption thing, the number one, the starting point is the judiciary. Are you with me? You have a situation where you have obvious, you have a case of, for instance, somebody involved in money laundering worth 23 billion or so, And yes, the accomplice gets 25 years or so. Somebody gets 3 years option of fine of 3 million. A young lady stole a few millions in a company, an eatery, and is sentenced to 200 and something years for stealing 9 million. Now, how do you reconcile this? These are the kind of issues that an attorney general should take up, whether at state or federal level, that this is injustice. Baltimore, what is happening there? You have a prosecutor, a young lady, 35, comes from five generations of police officers, and then somebody was killed, and immediately says, look, these people, they are accomplices, they must be tried. These are the kind of, she could do that because she's not tied to the apron strings of the executive.
Yes.
And so the functions are very clear cut. You can't be head of department under the executive and you say you want to represent the interest of the Nigerian people at the same time.
So just to add to what he has said, I think he has broken it down. For the Minister of Justice, his loyalty is to the government, is to push the justice sector reforms of the government, to push the agenda of the government in terms of justice sector reforms or even administration of justice. But the Attorney General of the Federation is supposed to act in the best interest of the entire Federation. So if there are cases even against the government that, that borders on constitutional breaches, he must take up the fight without being seen as working against the government. Because his loyalty is to the Constitution,
Yes.
is to the society, is to the rule of law, is to constitutionalism, is to rights protection.
Okay.
But as a minister, of course, his part of the executive
is to
the executive. So the appointor.
Okay. Another issue that's causing friction seems to be the issue of the provision of pension for life for leaders of the National Assembly.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
Pension for life?
Yes.
You see, my own thought is this. Issues like that ought to be subjected to a referendum of the Nigerian people. You see, if you look at the basic requirements that the constitutional engineering process must fulfill, then you'll be able to know whether a particular decision ought to be sustained or not. For instance, the first requirement is legitimacy. Legitimacy. I mean, any constitutional amendment to be, to be what? To be valid, must be legitimate. And the legitimacy is derived from the referendum of the Nigerian people. Two, again, you must have the proper authority convening the process, the representatives of the people. Now, you cannot even validate all those resolutions without a referendum of the Nigerian people. So, you see, all of these things, when you say pension for life, those are privileges that you want to assign to...
Sorry, if I may come in. We do have a caller, Chidi from Lagos. Hello, Chidi. Hello?
Yeah, hello?
Yes, Chidi, your contribution, please.
Yeah, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, please, I want to ask a clarifying question.
Go ahead.
Okay, please, can the gentleman help me? The office of the Attorney General, is that like a parallel to the office of the Accountant General, where you also have the Minister of Finance? What we are advocating here.
Okay. It's close to it. Very close to it. Yeah, the Accountant General of the Federation is a technocrat. He's a professional. He acts on behalf of the Federation. And when you are talking of the Federation like this, you are not just talking of the federal government. You are also talking of the constituent units that constitute the Federation.
And the people.
And the people. But the Minister of Justice, just like my colleague also explained, is a functionary of the executive. He is part and parcel of the executive. He is an appointee of the executive. he can be fired if he
by the
appointor. He cannot be seen to be disloyal. And when you talk of loyalty in our own setting here, it's 100%. You cannot not have loyalty 99%. But sometimes you might be championing the cause of the average Nigerian in a manner that the establishment might consider offensive and interpreted as disloyalty. So you need a professional to act in the larger interest, and you need a politician to function at the whims and caprices of the executive.
Okay, Mr. Shitu, let's get back to what we were talking about because we're almost out of time. Okay. The issue of pension for life for legislators, yes, leaders in the House, in the National Assembly.
Yes. For part-time work. What I've said is this. Has that decision been taken from popular participation of Nigerians? You and I, have we been consulted sufficiently to agree on pension for life for our legislators? And that's the point the president is making in this letter. And I think the incumbent president ought to be applauded. Because if you look at the letter he wrote to the National Assembly, if he were to think of his interest, he wouldn't write that kind of letter. But he's saying that he does not want to transfer burden for the incoming administration. More so when he has raised salient constitutional issues that ought to be interpreted by our course. So I think issue of pension for life, I will not sit here and justify it. I will not consider it outrageous, but I want whatever decision that will come by way of amendments to our constitution, which is the ground norm, to be a product of a referendum of Nigerian people. Okay. Popular participation, inclusivity, authority, validity, and then sovereignty of the Nigerian people.
As we wind down, this one, in 2006, 108 amendments to the Constitution were thrown away with the third term in 2006. Just about 70 proposed amendments have been made now. What's the guarantee that this will not also be thrown out? Consider the amount of money that has been spent in the amendment processes and man hours and all of that. So as we wind down, let's just get your views on that.
Well, my view, it is so sad that the legislature, the truth must be told, I will not subscribe to the notion that we can mind the kind of language to be used in describing the irresponsibility that's been going on at the National Assembly. For instance, this issue of pension for life and all that, these things were tried at the state level, and the state governors went away with it. So many states now, they pay pension, they give the governors 2 houses, they pay for their... After you retire, and the average Nigerian workers, you can't pay them 18,000 naira per month. And now they want to take this up to the federal level. It is godly irresponsible. We should not say because, yes, we want to amend the Constitution, we should allow irresponsible politicians to smuggle very silly things into the ground norm. The Constitution is a different kind of law. The issue of pension is not the kind of issue that should be included in constitutional provisions. They are supposed to be subject of, there are so many acts and laws at the state levels that deal with pension. Now, the third term, yes, the ones that were 200 and something provisions, it was most unfortunate that the baby was thrown away with the bathwater. Something similar is about to happen. Now, that is most unfortunate. It should not be like that.
Okay. We need to wind up.
Yes, sorry. If our legislators, if they were actually functioning properly, they would know how to separate the wheat from the chaff. This time around, so let it be. They can actually look at it, remove the bad ones and retain the good ones, and pass them for the benefit of the Nigerian people.
Well, finally, I think we should look at key areas, which I think is very important. Strengthening the sovereignty returning sovereignty back to the Nigerian people. Strengthening the supremacy provisions of the Constitution. Strengthening the institution that we expect will consolidate our democracy, as well as strengthening the institutions that will allow true federalism to operate.
All right.
All of this is very important. But beyond that, there is no constitutional engineering process that can be for the benefit of you and I if it does not make chapter 2 of our constitution, fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy, justiciable. That is the real amendment that I expect to see. That will make you to be able to challenge any government for being corrupt, for not taking care of our rules, for not providing education, for not providing health services. You should be able to go to court, just like the Indian constitution has prescribed. Right. Until we get to that, I don't think all we are engaging is just tokenism.
Thank you. Mr. Wahab Shittu is a legal practitioner, and also Mr. John Oluede, a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming. We've been discussing the Constitution Amendment disagreement between the Executive and the National Assembly. We'll take a break and we'll come back to look at another perspective, all to do with Nigeria.